The Dallas Cowboys have kicked off their summer OTAs. We'll tell you the 3 things we are looking to see from practice this week next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. And Landon, the Cowboys have kicked off their summer OTA workouts, the organized team activities. No tackling, light contact, not even real contact. It's
no contact. Please don't contact anybody.
Yeah, the Cowboys got in trouble before with some contact issues, but
that's right.
It's basically like glorified walkthrough. And that's essentially what it is.
Yeah, anything short of contact's allowed. So, I think that there are guys running around, probably not at quite full speed, but at least at this point. But I think, there's guys moving around and being athletic and
you're not seeing one-on-ones or anything like that.
No,
pretty tone back.
But they preach, one of the things that they talk about is kind of teaching them how to practice, practice, right? So they've kind of gone through that already. And part of what they teach is what does three-quarter speed look like? What does half speed look like, right? They kind of work on their tempos a little bit. So I would imagine that they're probably doing a lot of half speed, three-quarter speed as they're kind of being instructive at this point and really doing a lot of install in early days.
So we're going to talk about the 3 things that we are looking forward to seeing, hearing, coming out of Cowboys OTAs. And I think the most important is the lineup changes and kind of where everybody's lining up. Let's start with the offensive line. I think, Landon, we are assuming that Tyler Guyton is going to be their starting left tackle. Tyler Booker, their first-round pick from this year's draft, is going to be their starting right guard. But until we get to these practices, until we hear for sure, I think it's all up in the air as to what the Cowboys might do here.
Yeah, and I can already hear some of you guys screaming at us through YouTube. It is loud. Please turn it down. But these guys are not going to be always putting out the week 1 starting lineup, in OTAs immediately. We've obviously dealt with coaching staffs previously that have put out, have been reluctant to put out rookies. But that doesn't matter. Like, it's still seeing how they're arranging these guys. Like, I think you can tell a lot by, is Tyler Smith playing left tackle when he takes
that's the big one.
Steps? Is
Tyler Guyton running with the second team? Like that, all of those things will raise red flags for me.
Is Tyler Guyton playing right tackle? For some reason, seriously, the questions that we have right now about with all the flexibility that you have with several different members of the squad, the open-endedness of it. No, there's really no commitment to even the best offensive lineman on your squad. You're not 100% sure where he's going to play. And with this new coaching staff, kind of coming in and then wholly upending it, you really don't have any idea where these guys are going to play. And obviously, like I just mentioned, maybe it's not the first rep that you're going to get all that information, but I think all this information is going to be something. It's going to tell us something. It's like, again, is BB playing center? Is BB playing a lot of guard? Is Brock Hoffman suddenly playing center? Yep. I just think that there's a lot of different ways that they could combo all of this together to try to get their best 5. And just seeing how they're trying it out early will give us some kind of indication of what we may be in store for the rest of the summer.
And it's not just the offensive line either. I know we were talking pre-show. You're interested to see the cornerback rotation, who's playing in the slot. We kind of anticipate that maybe Deron Bland will get the first crack at it, and they'll see if they have the outside corners to make that possible. Is it Israel Makamu who's playing in the slot? I'm looking to see the receivers. Is it Jalen Tolbert in 3 receiver sets with George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb? Is it Kevontae Turpin? What does that look like? Do they want Jonathan Mingo to be one of the outside receivers? I will say that a lot of times the Cowboys restrict what these beat reporters and what the media can send out. We'll hear. We'll find out. What if something fishy is going on, like in the offensive line room, you can best believe that it's going to get out.
Yeah, for sure. And look, they can only hide it for so long. I mean, eventually we'll get to training camp and they got to show us something, at least some stuff. So, yeah, I think we'll get some indications if there's anything weird formationally that they're doing, if there anything that all will play into kind of, how it's going to look moving forward. And we'll any kind of major disruptions or changes on this lineup, we'll probably get whispers from somebody in that locker room.
I also want to point out the defensive line. Like, it's one of the spots I want to see is like, where is Micah Parsons lining up? I'm going to assume it's as that left defensive end, but is Matt Eberflus moving him around? If that's the case, is it Marshawn Nealon as one of the starting ends? Is it Dante Fowler? How's Donovan Ezeraku? Where's he fitting in? Is Sam Williams practicing, coming back from his torn ACL? I know that these OTAs are very light, but there's still a lot that you can take away from them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just think that we've spent all summer without any kind of, or all early winter, spring, without any information really. I mean, we kind of see the signings or whatever, but that's it. Like, we don't have any kind of information about the major part of the change and the improvement on this roster is happening in the offseason with these younger players getting better. And we don't get an opportunity to check in or see what these guys are looking like throughout the spring or winters as they're working out. So just to kind of check in to see where they are, where the coaches have them lining up, because that's the other thing too, is that all winter that these guys have been kind of under the microscope as these new coaches come in and potentially move these guys around. So are we going to see guys lined up in different spots, or a different sort of pecking order in the depth chart in some of these spots? So I do think that a lot of the stuff, especially in a year where you have a new head coach, and obviously that entails a new defensive coordinator as well. I think there's a lot to glean from these early OTAs, just because you don't know very much about your team at this point, and you just getting any of this information is kind of just a step towards figuring this whole thing out before the training camp starts.
How long before somebody freaks out about Jaden Blue being behind Miles Sanders, Javonte Williams, and maybe Deuce Vaughn at OTAs?
Tomorrow? I mean, today, like today when the reports come out, like I imagine it's going to happen pretty soon. Look, I mean, I've already seen people tweeting out the Travis Hunter clips and talking about his route running in an OTA practice. Like I'm like, guys, like it's May 19th. It's May 20th.
I will say the main culprit of these overreaction are fantasy football players. I'm including myself in there. We are very weak when it comes to this kind of stuff. We overreact to the littlest bit of news. I promise it's not that big of a deal if your 5th round rookie is lining up behind 2 veterans who've started a bunch of games in the NFL. It's not a big issue at all. It's just not.
Yeah. Again, I think there's interest here, but like, let's remember that none of this stuff that we see early is set in stone. So it's all very fluid still. So yeah, certainly don't make or break your fantasy football rosters, or do. I don't care. Please don't.
I love that you're talking fantasy advice. We're going to need
to
have
I don't.
On Lockdown
I don't want to
Dynasty.
talk about. No, we're not talking about fantasy football. Not on this show.
We're in fantasy season. This is fantastic. Already doing some drafts right now. It's a great time. All right, later. Let's talk about something that I personally love. Every player in the NFL is in their best shape of their lives. They either gained 15 pounds of muscle or they lost 15 pounds of fat this offseason. It's unbelievable how everybody's in the best shape they've ever been. Let's talk about it next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I absolutely love FanDuel, and I love the NBA playoffs. And with the playoffs in full swing, we're in the conference round now. Every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there has never been a better time to get in on the action. And FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. I think the Thunder are going to run away with the rest of the NBA playoffs. I think they're going to beat the Timberwolves and then obviously beat the Pacers or the Knicks in the NBA Finals. So go bet on them right now in the futures market. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head over to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. And if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are discussing the 3 things that we want to see coming out of Dallas Cowboys OTAs this week. And Landon, inevitably, this is always one of the biggest stories. I was reading it this morning about Marvin Harrison Jr. putting on 15 pounds of muscle and looking absolutely jacked. I want to see like whose body is physically changed compared to what we saw last year. What does Mazi Smith look like? Does he look like he's 320 pounds or does he look like he's 290? I do think some of this matters. I think we overblow it a little bit.
Sure,
but I do think seeing some of these guys out on the field does matter.
I think the reporting of it is what I think gets blown out, right? Like we get these ridiculous numbers, often completely ridiculous and unattainable and not even superhumanly possible. And some of that stuff is really blown out. But I do think that you can actually get something and I've talked about this with training camp, right? Like one of the first things I do when I get out to training camp is just try to watch all these guys and try to get like a visual template of what you imagine these players look like their shape basically, so that you can find them easily in the crowd later. Right. And I think there's something to the idea of going back and watching those last few games of the regular season from last year and then taking a look at some of these pictures and videos of these guys and trying to glean, hey, how does this guy look, comparison to where he was? And I think you named some of the big guys, right? Like literally, Mazi Smith is a guy that, the story of his weight is legendary right now at this point. He lost all this weight going into the rookie year for reasons that still have not been well explained to us. And then obviously dealing with the shoulder injury, he didn't get an opportunity. It was a shoulder, right? Something up in his upper body that limited his ability, obviously, in the offseason last year to kind of properly get all that weight gain or even do a full offseason worth of weight gain, muscle gain because of that. This is his first opportunity, his first offseason to kind of get a full, clean offseason of getting into the weight room and try to get something back close to where he was when he came out of Michigan. So, I'm super interested to see where he is. I'm super interested to see where Tyler Guyton's body is, right? Because this is a guy that, came into didn't have a ton of experience, right? But obviously spent some time at OU. They have a great weight room. There's nothing wrong with that, but there's still something different to being a full-time professional. What has he been doing in the offseason? We've heard all kinds of different stuff, right? We got very cryptic, tweets from Duke at some point that maybe we all misinterpreted or we weren't sure. So I just think there's a lot of speculation, and he's a big part of what this team is doing. So we need to see some of these guys and how they checked in. I want to see how Pickens looks next to CeeDee Lamb. I want to see how I want to see how their bodies look. Well, CeeDee is not exactly more than a beat pull. So, but yes, I agree.
CeeDee is probably 15 pounds heavier than what George Pickens is right now.
CeeDee is probably Pickens is probably where CeeDee was 2 years ago, right? Yes. Like before he put on the weight. So
Pickens is a legit 6'3", 190. Like he is thin.
Skinny.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see those guys. I'm excited to see Ravel on the field, just body type. Guys like Sam Williams, a guy that completely missed all of last year. We heard reports before he got injured that he had put on 10 pounds of muscle, best shape of his life season, right? So we'll see how he comes in. So there's just a lot of guys who it's about checking in with off-season progress that are young, that you feel like maybe could have made significant moves in improving their athleticism. And so you just checking in with that.
And it's not always positive, because there are times where you'll hear stuff and it raises a red flag. I'll give you two. A couple years ago, Neville Gallimore coming out of Oklahoma was a 290-pound, quick first step, get up the field defensive tackle. And then we heard a report, I think he even said, hey, he gained 25 pounds of muscle in one offseason. First of all, I kind of rolled my eyes when I hear that, because you're not putting on 25 pounds of muscle. And he wasn't somebody that was ever going to win by being stout. He was going to win by athleticism. And that year he did absolutely nothing, kind of got phased out of the rotation. I think another example is Jake Ferguson from last year.
Yep, I was just going to say.
Ferguson tried to put on some extra weight because he was going to be a full-time tight end. And, players lose weight as the season goes on. But what ended up happening is Ferguson was just too bulky. He's not a great athlete to begin with, and when he added the extra weight, it just zapped all of his explosiveness on top of the knee injury. So I think it has to kind of make sense body wise. Like if I hear Javonte Williams is at 215 pounds and he's down 10 pounds from last year, I actually think that's fantastic news for him. Because as running backs get older, you want them to shed weight. So it's very player specific here. So keep an eye on that.
Yeah, it really is. I think player specific is the best way to put it, right? Everyone's kind of on their own journey at this point. And so you consider where they are and what you're looking at, and then you examine exactly, how they've moved along that line, basically. I think Sam Williams is really one that is a great example of a guy that we've kind of lost track of because right as he's supposed to be debuting in this kind of situation, he ends up hurting his knee and that, kind of went away. So there's lots of those guys that I'm just kind of excited to get eyes on and see, how their off season has been and how they're moving around out there.
I would also say sometimes you can just see in the body of a player what the plans are going to be. Like, for example, if Marquise Bell looks like he's 230 pounds, maybe the Cowboys are anticipating moving him back down to linebacker. I'm not saying that that's the case, but I wouldn't be surprised. I remember back in the early 2010s, Tyrone Crawford was a great one. Like you could just see, okay, hey, Tyrone Crawford's down to 275. He's a defensive end. Yeah. And then of course you'd have like 3 defensive tackles get hurt. He'd have to go play defensive tackle. But like that was a good idea of where the Cowboys were planning on playing him. So keep an eye on that because I do think it's going to tell us something as we get closer to the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a handful of these guys that are, borderline guys, tweener guys. Izzy's one of these guys. I think if he's in there and it looks bulkier, that may be him prepping to play more safety this year. But if he's in there kind of looking light, quicker than he normally would, that maybe he's playing more nickel than he was previously. So there's a lot to tell from a lot of these different guys all up and down the roster. And again, you said it really well. I think it's relative to themselves, right? It's relative to where they are on their journey and where they were previous to this. I think that's the important information when you're examining this.
How long before the media sees Joe Milton standing next to Dak Prescott and starts gawking at Milton and saying, hey, the Cowboys might have got a steal here. Look how far he can throw the ball. Like Joe Milton should dominate OTAs. Like this is set up for him to look like a superstar.
Well, I mean, it's basically a 7-on-7 situation, that's what I'm saying, right? Yeah. So yeah. I mean, there's, and that's where you guy like, Milton is like a legend where, you see videos of Milton. Hey, look at me throw this orange 100 miles an hour.
That's why I can't wait. As soon as it happens, I'm going to retweet it because I know that some beat reporter is going to get sucked in. Cannot wait.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Somebody's going to be, absolutely, gobsmacked by him throwing a ball through a tackling dummy or something ridiculous that he'll pull off during at OTAs or training camp, and it'll get retweeted, and then the lead of ESPN that night will be: is Dak in trouble? Is Dak competition?
Can't wait for the Doug Kleiman tweet about Dak Prescott, QB2. It's going to be awful. All right, let's talk about some other things that we're excited to see during Dallas Cowboys OTAs, including what does the new coaching staff have in store? We will get to that next. Welcome back to this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting Show. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and the news never stops. Hosts Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. All right, Landon, it's a new coaching staff. We've got Schottenheimer running the show. You've got Matt Eberflus calling the defense. You've got a new first-time offensive coordinator in Clayton Adams. I'm curious to see how they're going to handle their first OTA.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's lots of different aspects about it that are interesting to see, right? And I think it starts kind of with how does each person fill their role, during a practice, right? Is Schottenheimer, how much is Schottenheimer working just exclusively with the offense? Is he making a concerted effort to be around the defense as well? What does Clayton Adams' job look like, right? Like, is it similar to Schotty, where Mike would leave, and then obviously it's just Clayton basically running the show, and then even when Mike comes back over there, Shotty's kind of running it, and Mike's just kind of making comments where he needs to? Or is Shotty going to continue to be more hands-on because it's kind of an interesting situation, because he's elevated into the play caller and he's the head coach, right? So how does that actually affect what he does versus what Mike McCarthy did when Mike McCarthy was doing both as well, right? So, I think, with Eberflus, there's a little bit of insulation there. Obviously, he's a former head coach. He's been a defensive coordinator for a long time. You don't really worry as much about, like, how is that going to look? There's a lot of familiarity there. And the other thing too is that you've got a lot of coaches that are Eberflus guys, right? So even the guys that are not necessarily professionally familiar with Eberflus, like Whitehead and some of, I think the defensive, I think one of the linebacker coaches was new as well, besides Borzinga. I think there are guys down here that they have people that they can lean on, other coaches that they can lean on. On the offensive side, it's basically all new. I mean, I was outside of Lunda Wells. It's a completely new staff and Schottenheimer, right? So does that even mean that, like, there is McCarthy holdover of any kind, right? Like, or is this completely blank slate the way he runs practices? I just remember that when McCarthy took over, like, the differences in training camp practices between him and Jason Garrett. And I wonder if we're going to see a similar kind of, clean break and very different organization of these practices, the way we did from the transition from the Garrett administration to the McCarthy administration. We kind of assumed, as Schottenheimer was assistant for McCarthy, this could be very much like, I think the national media is assuming, right, that because of Schottenheimer was a McCarthy assistant, that this is just like a continuation of the McCarthy era. I think the offensive language may be the same, but I think outside of that, I don't think it's going to be the same. I think that Schotty's going to come in here and want to leave his own mark, do his own thing. He has his own experiences, his own influences, and some strong ones from some Hall of Fame level coaches that aren't Mike McCarthy. So I wouldn't necessarily expect much more than maybe offensive language to stay the same between the administrations. I think Schotty's going to plot his own course.
And even then, I'm not sure it's going to stay the same, because he's got different offensive influences. I mean, he learned under coaches not named Mike McCarthy, right? So it could be completely different. I do think they're going to have some similar verbiage, and maybe the coaching staff is going to adapt to what they're already doing.
They said that's one thing that Adams came out and said that they were doing. Yeah. So that's specifically the verbiage. But you're right. Like, you can use that verbiage to call a completely different type of offense if you want.
Yeah. I think, and again, this won't be in OTAs. This will be more in training camp, that we're going to see more compete periods, because that's something that, like, Pete Carroll has built his entire career on. It's like having one day where all they do is compete, so they can have those competitive juices going all the time. And that's how they kind of figure out how guys slot in the roster. I won't be surprised if that's a carryover to Schottenheimer. But one of the things that I just want to hear from these OTAs is, what's the energy level like? What's the excitement level? And again, I know everybody's going to say, hey, we had a good practice, the energy's great out there. But you can kind of read between the lines if you're a seasoned vet with this, and you could tell, like, when guys are going through the emotions, or when they're really, really excited about a coaching staff. And I remember Dan Quinn last year going into Washington, and you just felt a vibe change compared to Ron Rivera. I want to see if that's going to happen for the Cowboys here, going from Mike McCarthy, a very good coach, to someone like Brian Schottenheimer, who's getting his first chance. Is there just a different level of intensity in these, again, glorified walkthroughs?
It's interesting, right? Because we, the kind of core principles about this coaching staff, they've been preaching a lot, right? Like leadership, about football character, those kind of guys who work hard, right? Like those things are those are things that they repeat, and then you hear the players repeat, right? I think one of the interesting things that you hear the players repeat based on their experience, not based on the kind of the coach speak that's happening, right? Is and other people too that are commenting outside the building. The thing you keep hearing over and over again is exactly what you talked about. It's energy. They have an energy about them. You talk to a couple of these different players, and they ask them, what was your experience like when you came in for your visit? And they talk about, man, like the energy here was great, right? And I know that sounds like a lot of nonsense, coach speak, unimportant stuff, but it does matter. And like having that kind of vibe, especially for these younger players, like that is very much like a way to tap into them, right? To kind of get them to buy in, right? When you have the right kind of energy, when it doesn't feel old and stale and tired, then it's easier to get these guys on board and get everyone kind of moving in the right direction. So, and I think that's one of the benefits. We've heard a lot of talk about this is a new young coaching staff, not a ton of NFL experience, and there is pretty big downsides to that, obviously. I think it's important, I think it's less important to have specifically NFL experience, at the position groups, but maybe at the higher spots. But there certainly is a downside to that. But I think that the positive side of it is that these guys are younger coaches that come from college. They know how to speak to these guys. They know how to get them excited. They know what motivates them maybe better than a 70-year-old offensive line coach, right? So I think that's something just a little bit. And I think that it's worth giving these guys the benefits of being a young coach while recognizing the detriments that they're going to experience as well.
All right, so real football on the field for the first time. We'll continue to break down all the news coming out of Dallas Cowboys OTA. Make sure you follow us on YouTube. Download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter @McCoolBCB. I'm @Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.